Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we are ready to embark on the first Mercury Atlas launches. So we're done with the Redstone rocket. We're going to open up the MR4. We'll base it off of this initially so that we can grab our Mercury vehicle off of this. That'll be absolutely fine. So we're just going to grab from here, and we're going to ditch the redstone portion of this rocket. Now, I don't think we have any wider fuselages at this point, unfortunately. So I want to, first off, show the actual Atlas rocket here. Oh, that is very large. Okay. I guess we're going to do this. When I click on this, it becomes altogether too large. Maybe if we do this? Nope, that is still altogether too large. Okay, so it's very difficult to see, but we can see here, this is the Mercury vehicle here. So that goes down to here where it gets joined on. And then we have this like tapering portion. So this is a fuel adapter, right? So that widens it out. Unfortunately, we don't have those unlocked yet. So we're just going to have to come straight on down, and we can see, I believe that these are, well, it looks to me in some of the flights of it launching, like this one here. Let's actually look at this when it's nice and big like this. Let's see what we've got here. Yeah, so we can see this looks like a separate plume here, here, and in the center. So these would be very, very minor stages, but this is like a stage and a half setup is what they have this as. It gets fired right off of the bat. All of these stages fire simultaneously. And looking at this, it looks like both are using liquid fuel. So we don't have any ability to like pipe liquid fuel in from outer stages. But honestly, it doesn't look like these have dedicated tanks to me. So they probably all pull from the same fuel source. So that's going to be interesting for sure. Let's hop back over here and we'll see how well we can do this. Can we get this into like a silver coloration? Unfortunately, no. So that's not something we can do. We also can't... So this first Atlas rocket is going to be very similar to the Redstone rocket, except there'll be a few minor changes to it. So I'm just tabbing back and forth here, looking at proportions. We definitely want to be able to get this widened out, right? We could emulate that with decouplers. So we would have like quad decouplers here. This isn't going to look exactly correct, right? This is definitely not how it was actually set up, but this would be emulating the widening of the tanks. So it would end up being something kind of like this. I would want to use the place tool, and this might be high up enough, actually. And because this, like, flows back in, we'll just use hemispherical liquid fuel tanks for now. Now, this is, of course, going to end up being redone later on. But we want to get this into wider setups here, so something kind of like this. And then we know it's a 3-engine setup. And looking at the actual rocket here, there's very little for fins. Looks to me like they probably... Like, if we look at this real quickly again, I don't see any real finiture here going on. This is probably done almost entirely via gimbaling. So, not much fins going on here. We definitely know that this is going to be interesting without fins. Okay, so with that being the case, let's call this approximately correct. Of course, this is nothing like the actual vehicle. We'll get it upgraded a little bit more later on. Let's use LT-45s. Now, in reality, what they used for this, if I go back forward here to the Wikipedia page. There we go. They used Rocketdyne XLR 1055 for the center stage and 2 Rocketdyne XLR 895s for the second or for the side stages. And those side stages actually have a lot more thrust than the first stage. So it kind of looks like, and I don't think we'll have the thrust to weight to do this, but it kind of looks like what they've got going on here, we'll need to actually turn symmetry off, is something like this, and then like a pug here. I'm betting we don't have the thrust to weight to pull that one off. What do we got? 0.71. Yeah, that's about what I expected there. Well, this is more fuel than we're likely going to end up having. So I think I'm going to bring this down to being bicoupled. So that's going to end up being like this. And that is what's going to emulate the widening out of these tanks. It's not perfect by any means. That's for sure. We're going to need to move this down 1.06, so this barely has enough thrust to lift off the ground. One thing I would like to consider is I would love to have fuel flow through out of here because this is going to burn out of fuel way faster. We could manually do that. That's an option. This is not particularly accurate for the Atlas rocket, but that will get better once we start returning some of these experiments that are in here, which is going to be very beneficial for us. So that is great there. 1.06 is just too low on the thrust to weight here. So, we could cut down on the amount of fuel. That's probably not a bad idea. So what if we cut 2 tanks out of each of these? And we do something like this instead. 1.33? That's better. I think we need to drop at least 1 more tank worth of fuel on each of these. $1.52. Okay, let's run a quick test flight of this. The proportions are definitely off, but they go up a fairing size, or not really a fairing size, a rocket diameter size. We don't have the ability to do that right now. I saved this as MR4, but this is not MR4. This is, I believe, MA-6. Double checking that. MA-6, yes. This is indeed MA-6. So we're going to save this for now. This is, at the moment, the best we can do, although we're definitely going to want to strut this together down here. That would certainly help. The real question... Apparently we can't grab parts? That's intriguing. Okay. I'm going to save this. We're going to hop out of the VAB and reload this. We may have hit a small bug here. That's exciting, for sure. We could restart the game if need be. That's not the end of the world. I'm going to try just leaving the VAB and going back in, and hopefully that'll fix it. So into the VAB we go. And what do we have available here now? Can we now actually grab struts? Yes, we can. Beautiful. So we must have been like in a wrong mode here or something. That's probably what it was. We might have still been in move mode. I don't know. I don't think so, though. So I'm concerned about having enough delta V to get this thing into orbit here. Specifically with these anemic first stages. How long is our burn time here? 62 seconds? Okay. Let's put this out on the pad as a test flight. We are going to revert this. I want to know how far we get here. Because that's going to be important. That's definitely going to be important. Okay, throttle up, SAS on, and our thrust to weight is going to be a bit on the low side. Let's see how far this ends up going. Our thrust to weight on this pug is going to be rapidly increasing. The real question is, how far do we get on these engines? Because once we ditch these outer engines, there's really not going to be much in terms of thrust at that point, once these engines are burnt out. So for now, I want to just go straight up and see how high up this gets. That's going to be very interesting for sure. So far, I'm guessing not very is the answer. Picking up a bit of a roll shimmy here. That's noted. 20-kilometer apoapsis. 30-kilometer apoapsis. I think we just don't have enough oomph here. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. See, we're at 0.17. That's deeply unsurprising. So we got to about a 40-kilometer apoapsis. We need just a little bit more power here. A little bit more kick. I mean, we can definitely activate the launch escape system and pull ourselves up a little bit more like that and ditch the launch escape system. That is an option. And then we can turn on over this way. But just look at how slow we're going. We just don't have the capacity to do this. I mean, we definitely want to end up ditching these, right? That would be our best bet there. And we have a lot of delta V in this engine. We just don't get there quickly enough, right? So we can see our orbital speed is definitely dropping here. We're going to hit the apoapsis. We just don't have enough initial off-the-pad speed. And that's exactly the problem that I expected to have here. So that's absolutely great. It's good that we have the problem that we expect. I'm going to bring this up by 1 additional T200 tank, I think. That's going to cut into our thrust-to-weight ratio. No doubt about that. And even this is not, you know, amazing. We're missing a strut here. That's intriguing. Okay. Something like that. There we go. So that'll be fine. We could also think about upgrading this engine, but this is very much more realistic, this engine setup. So that's fine. The real question here is, how can we eke ourselves out a little bit more off the pad thrust-to-weight ratio? We could toss in SRBs. That is not historical in the slightest. So, if we had tech, how would I do this? I would do this with a fuel adapter right here out to 2.5 meters, and then we would have a poodle down here, and then, well, actually this would be like an engine plate, and this would probably end up being a Terrier engine in the center, and then on the sides, I would probably end up maybe not doing swivels, but it would end up being something along those lines. So what if we did quad-couple this with 4 engines? That's very unrealistic. But our thrust to weight is a big problem. No doubt about that. Let's see what it's like this. Our thrust to weight is very, very low at 1.38. So we're going to be wasting a lot of our power simply fighting gravity. We're going to be moving quite slowly. This is an awkward rocket. Okay, good to know. The redstone came together much more easily with the tech that we have right now. Let's see how this goes. It's slow off the pad, for sure. But we definitely do have additional burn time here, so that is good. That'll push us up that little bit higher. And of course, we're going to continue to burn our launch escape system for additional altitude. Not like that really gets us a lot of altitude. But that's certainly something that we can do. So we've got about 45 seconds of burn time left here. I'm seeing if we pick up that shimmy again. And it's looking like we likely will, but honestly, control wasn't an issue with the previous flight. So I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is getting this thing up high enough and fast enough in order to properly get it into orbit. I don't know that we have the capacity to do a proper gravity turn, although that would be helpful. But I think that our launch systems are very anemic at this point. There's no doubt about that. So we've got 8 seconds of fuel left here. We see an apoapsis of 45 kilometers. Okay, we ditch that. We activate our SRB here to get us what we can, and then we'll decouple that, and we're going to head on over to the horizon at this point. Okay, so this is a 60-kilometer apoapsis. We've overshot the horizon slightly. That's not ideal. Okay. Something more along the lines of this. That definitely gets us a lot closer. I don't like what's going on with this orbital speed, though. That said, this is still very low in the atmosphere for the Pug. The Pug is going to get a lot more efficient once we actually exit the atmosphere. We're not quite at that point yet. Yeah, it's time to apoapsis. We don't get enough speed to do this sort of a long burn. That's what it comes down to. We would have to burn directly prograde. And even that, this is probably too low of thrust to weight. Yeah, I think that's what this is coming down to. Let's take it back to... I actually meant to take it back to the pad. What I wanted to do is I wanted to test aerodynamics really quickly on how this is going to work if we attempted a proper gravity turn. Because a proper gravity turn is going to shift more of our momentum horizontal than vertical. And we already don't have enough vertical momentum, right? So this is probably going to be a pretty abject failure as far as how far this rocket ends up going. We could extend it down more, but that's going to further limit our thrust-to-weight ratio. Ultimately, the core problem here is we have too much fuel in this center stage. One thing we might want to consider doing, actually, is pinning these guys open. Wait, we can't do fuel flow through these radial decouplers? Okay, never mind. That's not an option. Good to know. Okay, let's see how we do with a wee bit of a gravity turn over here. It seems relatively stable for the time being, but I'm not expecting that we get anywhere near the altitude we need. That's going to be the core issue here, of course. Mostly I wanted to check aerodynamic stability, and that actually seems to be pretty good. So that's good to see. I'm just going to burn here at the 45-degree marker. I'm also going to activate our launch escape system fairly soon here. I'm noting a shimmy picking up. SAS may be able to handle it. Best time would be now. Okay, and then we decouple that. We do not have the altitude to attitude control with our reaction wheel here. Okay, that is fantastic to know. So obviously the core issue here is two things. One, this is a ridiculous amount of fuel to put on top of a pug. There's no doubt about that. This is a very silly amount of fuel to put on top of a pug. The other thing that is clear is that we don't have enough fuel in these swivels, and we also don't have enough thrust to weight to lift this central amount of fuel. So we could continue to loot fuel out of this center core and increasingly make these ridiculous. That's an option. This thing is already not particularly accurate, so that is one choice. A second choice would be simply duplicating these outer stages. That, I think, is a very interesting option. And the reasoning that we can use here is A, having it be flat like that was not historically accurate, right? We know for a fact that this rocket, when it flared out in a, circular shape. It went to a different radius. So we can definitely make the argument that this is more correct than what we had before. What we can't make the argument as being more correct is this engine setup. However, without this engine setup, this thing is not getting off the pad. That's just the way it is. This is a 1.71 thrust to weight ratio, which is a far, far better thrust to weight ratio. And it'll also burn slightly longer, apparently. I'm not sure how real that is, but it'll also burn, it should burn about the same amount of time, but a higher thrust to weight ratio means that we get further with it, right? So let's put this thing out on the pad. And honestly, I don't feel like our last iteration with the straight up and then over, I don't feel like that needed that much more oomph, to be honest. I feel like just doing this will get us there. It's not perfect. I would definitely prefer to not have basically double the number of engines of the real craft. But here we are. It's just not a viable thing with this design. With additional tech, we can make this more real, and that's going to be the goal. Although I just realized X-Science had an update, and we need to reopen the X-Science Here and Now window, which I believe all we need to do is right-click this, right? Nope, that's on music mute. Right, we need to change it to that. There we go. And then we need to do this, although it's way too small, so we need to adjust the scaling. I apologize for this. We just do it something kind of like about that. Looks good. Okay, cool. So that seems fine. We're going to throttle up, SAS on. This is now a real flight. I want to point that out. This is officially a real flight, and off we go. I'm a little bit concerned if we attempt a gravity turn that we're going to have a big tumble. So we're not going to attempt a gravity turn at this time. We're just going to head on up. And we will attempt a gravity turn, well, kind of a gravity turn. We need horizontal speed once we're high enough through the atmosphere. So I think once our apoapsis hits 50 kilometers, that's when we're going to start turning. It's very late. But without fins, I feel like we need to do that. We're definitely punching through the atmosphere a lot more quickly. And that's good. 30 seconds of burn time in our side stages. Apoapsis of 40 kilometers. And 50. Cool. Okay, let's just head on over here as best we can. We're trying here. Cool. This thing is not the most stable thing in the world. Okay, so we'll ditch those guys. I want to activate this engine, and then we will decouple our launch escape system. Eventually, we'll get free of that. We can see we have an apoapsis of about 100 kilometers, and we need a lot of horizontal speed at this point. The question is, do we have enough time for this slow burn at this point? According to this, the answer is yes. According to this, we'll need to start our burn in 5 minutes? Or no, start our burn 5 minutes ago? Our apoapsis is in like 1 minute. So that's going to be exciting. We need a lot of speed here. A lot of horizontal speed. That thing is definitely not the most stable through the atmosphere. That's for sure. No doubt about that one. And I feel like we had a little too much speed on the way up, to be honest. I'm not sure that we're going to get into orbit with this particular attempt here. It's now saying start burn like 2.5 minutes ago. Okay. We might have to burn more on gaining altitude, arresting vertical speed. I don't know. We'll see. This is a long ways to orbit at this point. We need a lot of horizontal speed. So that's definitely a core issue. That said, our thrust to weight has improved. But we're only about 40 seconds to the apoapsis at this point, and that is absolutely a concern. We need to just lock prograde at this point and hope. That's basically what we need at this point. But I think we're too late. I'm like 95% sure right now that this flight is not going to make it into orbit. This is a lot of fuel up here, to be clear. It's a whole lot of fuel. And it doesn't burn all that efficiently either. So it's certainly mildly awkward. So here we are at the apoapsis. I think we just lack too much speed here. I think that's all there is to it. We lack too much horizontal speed. We don't really have the time to do a burn like this. So we're going to have to bring it around to retrograde. It's unfortunate. The only way that this is going to work is if I successfully pull off a correct gravity turn. Okay, so we're going to assume that we recover. Well, no, we're not. I'm just going to do a recovery operation here quick. It'll be fine. We're going to need to ditch this engine here. So all of this fuel gets ditched. We'll recover this. But yeah, that's the problem here is we have so much fuel on that tiny little tank, right? And in reality, that's not how this ended up working, I don't think. But we're going to bring this on down. I'm going to start up a burn here to decelerate us as best we can. Cool. So we're continuing to decelerate here. We're going to move this on up. And we'll just recover what we can. We're about 10 kilometers up right now. Oh boy, this is feeling not great. Not great at all. But the drogue actually successfully deployed, so we're fine. That was dicey. I'm not going to lie. That was really dicey. So down we come, and that was awkward. But we need to attempt to get an actual gravity turn going. That's the only possible solution here. I think that's very, very clear at this point. So with that being the case, we're going to bring this on back, and we're going to try this flight again. I'm going to actually cut 2 of these parachutes, just so that we fall a little faster. Perfect. And we're going to launch this thing again. We have to pull off the gravity turn, or else it's just not going to work. We have a lot of in-space fuel on this thing. You know what? We could definitely... No, I don't want to revert this. I want to recover this. We could definitely make the argument that we are not needing the pug in that center stage and instead go for just a less powerful, like, non-T-45, right? Something along the lines of, I mean, a T-30 is more powerful. That would be moving away from the concept. I don't love it. I don't love it at all. Come on, load on in. You can do it. Let's see what our options are. Okay, let's hop in here. Let's see what our options are. For the record, the Atlas rocket, before the version that they used for the Mercury program, had a pretty crappy record, so seems fine. We'd go with, like, the T-15. Yeah, that's a lot higher thrust, but still quite a lot lower thrust than a T-45. I like this option. So we go with a lower thrust, but still higher than what we had thrust option here. This is 1.89 right now. I want to thrust limit these guys down to about a 1.6 thrust to weight ratio. I really like 1.6 for a thrust to weight ratio. So something along the lines of that will do. So we boost up the Valiant in the center, and the swivels out on the edges are thrust limited down a little bit to compensate, and we're going to try a gravity turn. This may go badly, but if it does, well, it's not the end of the world. Except for maybe for Jeb. It might be the end of the line for Jeb. We'll see. We're going to try this. It's going to be interesting. We do have a lot of gimbal on here. And this doesn't have a lot of bend to it, so it should be reasonably fine. We're decent off the pad, of course, and I want to hop into maneuver mode here so we can keep an eye on that apoapsis. We're going to bring this on up. 100 meters per second. Okay, we're going to start a very, very small amount of horizontal speed here. We're just going to slowly drift on over. This is definitely not the stablest rocket we've seen in this series. And that's due to the lack of fins. Okay, I'm going to try to hold attitude here for a little bit until our apoapsis pushes up to, I don't know, around 30. Somewhere around there. So that's 20. And that's 30. Okay. Now we're going to head on over to the prograde marker. And we're just going to lock to prograde. Okay. So this is 50. That's 60. And these guys are still burning. I want to be over at the horizon about now. This is so much more speed. This is insane. Okay. That is so much more speed. So that puts us at 136. That's good enough. More than good enough. So we just do something kind of like that. Beautiful. And we're going to use our launch escape system as well, once we get into position for that. Yeah, that was so much more on the thrust to weight there. Just having this Valiant instead of the Pug made so much difference there. That's insane. The thrust to weight here is, of course, 1.39. And yeah, that's so much better. Okay, so we need to warp on forward to our burn point here. And let's see here. MA-6 orbited 3 times. That's definitely something that we can do. So let's warp forward a little further. Cool. 3, 2, 1, 0, mark. So we're just using that first. And then we're pushing our way out of here. I would like to not have that tower be there, but whatever. It doesn't actually matter. So this is fine. Like, this is not an issue. The launch tower ideally should be jettisoned slightly differently, but that's fine. We've got 40 seconds of burn here, and we've got 91 seconds of burn in the Mercury capsule. We're doing absolutely wonderfully here this time. Just swapping that single engine made such a big difference. And this is still a much weaker engine than the outside engines. Unfortunate that we're running 4 engines for the Atlas rocket right now. That's not accurate, but I mean, this is KSP. It's not going to be perfect. And that is us in orbit, just circularizing up that orbit a bit, but that's good enough. It's not a great orbit. If we look at the advanced orbital info, 0.01 eccentricity, 0.9 inclination, but that'll do. So we need to orbit this 3 times, so we'll add a maneuver here. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. And let's warp on over. We don't need to be stopping this every single time. 2, and... was that 4 orbits? That might have been 4 orbits. Well, we'll call that 3 orbits. Let's flip around to retrograde here, and we're going to have to prepare for re-entry. Beautiful. So with us flipped around, we don't even need to warp. We just can re-enter basically anytime we want to, right? I mean, we're best off to go to the periapsis here, though, and add a maneuver here. Really, we should be doing it like this. So this will be somewhere around 20 kilometers will be fine. Cool. So let's warp on over to that. We didn't actually get any real data out of this, which is mildly disconcerting, but I'm not actually surprised about that. This is all in space near, and we had transmitted back a lot of that data. We can grab our mystery goo observation. That's fine. We may as well. No reason not to. And this will be our first craft that survives re-entry, right? So that'll still be a very, very good boost for our science. And now. Beautiful. A little bit more to burn off here, but there we go. Fantastic. 20 kilometers, and we can recover all of this. We can use this as a braking burn going through the atmosphere. But honestly, we're probably better off to just ditch our existing fuel and come in with our heat shield. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to ditch that. This is unutilized. It is here for orbital maneuvering. And we don't need to do any orbital maneuvering right now. So let's just bring back our capsule. Wonderful. So that is the first American in space at this point. Jebediah is now the first American and the first Soviet in space, due to the fact that there are only female pilots available, which is mildly disconcerting because we also have a milestone for first female pilot in space. We can grab our mystery goo observation here, that's fine. And we'll continue to warp our way on through, going into surface mode here. And we can see just how high we are above the ground, 57 kilometers right now. Wonderful. We should... yeah, we're starting to slow down now. Phenomenal. And we should start to slow down prodigiously shortly. And I just noticed that alarms thing has been open for a while. Let's get rid of that. Phenomenal. So we're crossing under 2 kilometers per second right now. And of course, I should have noted at some point that the speeds and masses and sizes of objects in KSP are wildly different than in reality. Things are like 10 times smaller in the Kerbal system than in reality, and so speeds are also considerably slower. Okay, we can grab our crew report. We can grab a temperature scan here. I love it. We'll grab what data we can. And we can send out a drogue chute. That'll slow us down enough. And main chutes. Cool. We're already flying low. We'll grab this EVA report as soon as we can. Unfortunately that we're coming down over land. This is supposed to be a splashdown, but it's fine. We're not going to have a problem with a land landing. Unlike in reality, where they had problems with land landings. It was definitely designed for splashdown. And when they had some aborts and land landings, it did not go all that well. I mean, it went better than it could have, but it was not ideal. Okay, so we grabbed our data there, and downward we go. Once again, I'm going to cut some parachutes here, just so that we come down a little faster. Although, with it being a land landing, I'm actually not going to. We're just going to bring this right on down. We can call this a successful first flight. High argument, null exceptions. We can call this a successful first flight, and we can bump in our funding while we wait here. And as we drift on down, I'll mark this off as done. We will revisit the Atlas rocket and make it more accurate, as that is possible to do so. But that is definitely an interesting design. Certainly planned to be an ICBM, not a crewed rocket. No doubt about that. Let's bring this on down and bring Jebediah Kerman on home. Beautiful. And there we go. We can grab our crew report. We can grab a temperature scan. We can grab an atmospheric pressure scan. We can EVA and grab an EVA report. We already grabbed our mystery goo observations, so this will do for now. And let's recover that, and we'll see what we get for science. Hopefully a decent amount. We definitely have some science that we need to get. No doubt about that one. It's also past time to put a cut in here, so as soon as we know this, I'm going to go ahead and do that. But let's see what we get for science first. Anytime now. You can do it, KSP. There we go. 36.8 science. I would have liked to get a little bit more than that, but we also got ourselves this world's first milestone, returning to the surface from orbit. Okay, so we have 44.9. That is exactly not enough to get anything. Perfect. Well, it is time to put that cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we are going to be doing, looks like Vostoks 3 and 4. Okay, that'll be an interesting one. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Shadow Wolf, Andy McGar, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.